There you go. So we're going to start here first.
Okay.
And then there's a couple of handouts I'd like you guys to take. So, could you be in charge of handing this out? I think I can trust you? Yeah. Okay. You didn't know you were going to be put to work, did you? While she's doing that, let's pray. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, amen. O Heavenly King, comfort of the Spirit, the true God everywhere, and fill us all things. Treasure your blessings and give our life. Come and abide in us, cleanse us from every impurity, save our souls. Through the prayers of our holy fathers, Lord Jesus Christ, our God, have mercy on us and save us. Amen.
Amen.
So this is everyone's favorite class, because they all want to know why we do what we do, and why the church is set up this way. And so, a couple of things before we start to kind of go through things. So the first thing is to know that the church, an Orthodox church, is based on two different things. The first is the original temple in Jerusalem, from the Old Testament. And the if you look at that, you'll see that the Old Testament, if you look at that little sheet of paper there, that there were different sections of the temple. You had the Holy of Holies, which was where the Ark resided, right? The Ark of the Covenant. And we're going to get into a little bit more about that. And then you had the place of the faithful and the place of the penitent. Okay? And that the Holy of Holies, the high priest could only enter once a year. And they used to tie a rope around him. Because if he, was not holy, he dropped dead and they couldn't go in to get the body, so they had to be able to drag the body out. You can read about this in the Old Testament. But the Holy of Holies was the holiest place. It's where God dwelt. But something happened. If you remember, the temple was destroyed. And then it was rebuilt. But it was rebuilt without the ark, because the ark had disappeared. We know where it is. It's in Ethiopia in an Orthodox church there, but that's a whole other story. And only one monk is allowed to, and he stays in the church for his entire life. So they were doing sacrifices and all these different things to an empty temple, to an empty Holy of Holies. All right? So I want you to keep that in the back of your mind as we go through it. The other thing is that it was based on what's called the Roman basilica. A basilica, basil means kind of like ruler. So a basilica was a place of judgment. So when the emperor or his representatives, they sat in this long hall which had a circular back, so it helps with the acoustics, and he had a throne. And he would sit on that throne and make judgment. So what happened is those two different pieces sort of merged together. The Holy of Holies, the temple in Jerusalem, and the basilica. And most Orthodox churches are based off of that. Now, normally, an Orthodox church is built in two different styles. It's either like a cross, like you would see a cross, or it's like the bottom of a ship. All right, take a look. Does this look like the bottom of a ship? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it would, because the ship is the ark of salvation. And so, hi Lauren, how are you? You missed my great introduction. No, I'm just teasing you. And so you had the idea of the temple in Jerusalem and the Holy of Holies. And you had this idea that the church is the ark of salvation. It's the place where you're safe. Outside's chaos, right? But in the ark, it's good. Right? So you keep that in your mind. Now, it's interesting because as the Orthodox Church as it started to develop in the first century, you saw this combination of the Jewish elements, and you saw this combination of kind of the pagan elements coming together. So if you, for example, and you could go to the Peabody Museum in Yale and see this. They uncovered in, I think it was Lebanon or Syria, a first century church and a first century synagogue. They were like on the same street. And they looked almost similar, like almost the same. And so we could see then what is happening is that the Jewish and Christian religion are developing. They're developing it kind of the same way, and then they kind of go off. But if anybody ever been in a synagogue, you'll notice some very similar things to an Orthodox church if you walk in the synagogue. Okay? Everyone clear on that? We're good? Mm-hmm. All right. So now we're going to stand up. We'll start back here. See, I told you we could walk. Check a little flat. You know, like you're going towards. But get your steps in. Not that big. So, as you notice in the church here, we're divided into three parts, right? The vestibule, the nave, and the sanctuary. Okay, now think about it this way again. Place of the penitent, place of the faithful, the Holy of Holies. Now, it's interesting, in the early church, if you say you did something and they said, well, you'll have to stand in the vestibule for like 2 years, and they would have to. They couldn't come into the church. And people would walk by and they're like, what did that person do? They've been here for a while. That kind of fell out. But if you go to any like my Ethiopian parishioners in Vegas, when they came into the church, the Coptics, they'll take their shoes off. They will come into the church barefooted because it's a holy place. Just like Moses, remember when he went and he took off his shoes? Please don't do that. And it's funny because I asked them like, well, I don't want to get the place dirty. Like Americans, we think, oh, bare feet are dirty. They think, no, wearing your shoes from outside dirties it. But anyway.
I feel like when you had the cross in the center, I felt like everyone should like take off their shoes.
Yeah.
I didn't, of course.
Well, what does God say to Moses when he approaches him, right? Take off your shoes, you're in a holy place. I'm not advising. I do have a pair of socks that they made for me with special crosses. They're priest socks. So when you serve at the altar, you have special socks that I haven't worn them. I'm not going to serve barefoot at the altar. But anyway, so actually this is a liturgical space, right? And so you could even see, I kind of set it up so it kind of mirrors the iconostas that's up there, right? But if you remember when a child is baptized, we begin the baptism here, and then the priest brings the child into the church. When you're married, where do you start? Here. And the priest leads the couple to the church. When you die, we start here, and the priest leads the body into the church. So we're always moving from this place to that place, in a sense. In some churches, my church in Las Vegas, for example, we had a baptismal font, and it was a huge vestibule, and we did the baptisms out there. And then some churches have a separate building just for baptisms. And so there was a certain sense that this is not just the candle desk and where the kids can all run around like they do now, but there's a liturgical space that we're moving from kind of the outside of the world of the penitent, into the world of the faithful. All right, and so that's the first thing I want you to keep in your mind. Now let's come. We're going to stand under the dome. So, there is a very famous story of Saint Vladimir, the one who first brought Christianity to Russia. And when Vladimir was converting from paganism, he wanted to decide this was 988. He wanted to decide what religion he would adopt. So he sent emissaries out into the world. Now, whether this is true or not, this is the way it's written. And so he sent people to the West, to the Roman Church. He sent people to the Muslim, he sent people to the Jewish, and he sent people to Constantinople, to the Orthodox. And then he had them come back in and report on it. And so they each talked about what they had discovered. And the people who went to Hagia Sophia, the great church in Constantinople, came back and said, we didn't know whether we were in heaven or in earth. God must be with these people. And so that's how Russia came to adopt Orthodoxy. Now, why would they say that? It's an important point. The church is a place where heaven and earth comes together. And you're going to see it more as we go forward. And so we always have this idea that heaven and earth meets in the church. In fact, there's some theologians say time stops when you're at liturgy. You're supposed to be in this timelessness. Of course it doesn't. You still age and stuff. But to think of a sense of being lifted out of this realm and having God come down, which is why in all Orthodox churches you will see domes, not spires, right? Spires, like you'll see in Catholic, kind of reaching up to heaven. The idea of the dome is that heaven is coming down to us. Normally, in some churches, they'll have Christ Pontecrator. That means all-powerful. And he's like a dome with his hands out like this, blessing everyone. And it's the idea of Emmanuel. God is with us. God has come down to us. And so this idea, or Mary is often pictured as the image of the church. Mary, church is a place where God dwells. Well, God literally dwelt in Mary, right? And so this image of Mary with Christ is a very popular one as well, kind of gathering the people together. So she's very often called the image of the church, okay? And so some of the domes are huge, and some are smaller, but that is a very common feature in Orthodox churches. Think of the term of Emmanuel. So this is sort of Mary gathering, Christ gathering us together under them. Very often around the sides, you'll see the procession of saints, and in the four corners, you'll have the four evangelists. Right? This is a little bit different. But this idea of that. Now, of course, culturally, you'll see, like the Russians, you have the onion domes. The Greeks will have the more flat domes. They'll have all different types. That's just a cultural thing. It has nothing to do with anything else. All right? So, in every church, there's a few things that you will notice. The first thing is this. This is called, are you ready for this? You're going to learn lots of new words today. Analogian. What does analogian mean? A stand. It's a fancy Greek word for a stand. All right? But it's an analogian, and it's normally in the center of the church, in the Russian tradition. All right? In the Greek tradition, they don't do this. And so, normally you can tell a lot when you walk in the church, when you see the center. First off, what do you notice? What color are we in? Gold. What were we in 2 weeks ago? Red. Well, 2 weeks before that, we were blue, right? Blue. So it tells you that there's a season, that gold is your normal color. That's kind of like your everyday normal color. But all the different periods in the church have different colors. This developed over time. Used to just say light and dark. But of course, you got to make things more complicated. So gold is your normal color. Red is anything to do with the cross or martyrs, and in preparation for Christmas. All right, so you'll see on November 15th when we go start the Nativity Fast, everything will get changed to red. Blue is anything with Mary. Green is with Pentecost. That's the color of life, that green green leaves and all that other stuff. Purple is Lent, and purple not because it's dark, because purple is the most difficult color to make. It's the most expensive. To make purple originally, you had to get this one snail's gland that was in the coast of Spain that, they had to extract it. It was incredibly difficult. Only the royal family wore purple. Like, you ever heard the term born to purple? It means that, because they got to wear purple. In fact, they even have stones called porphyry, purple stones. Wherever the emperor stood was a purple stone. So for us, Lent is the royal time of the year, and that's why we have purple. One of the later things that happened was we kind of adopted black, which we will do during Holy Week. We'll go to black, and there's different traditions about that as well. And then Easter is white, mostly. It says your brightest color. In Russia, they wear red. They have the bright, bright, bright red. In most of the other places, they do white. But so that's the other color, white. All right? So you could see all through the year, there's different changes. Now, if I had a staff here who can change the cloths for me and iron them and stuff, we would be much more changing the cloths according to different things. So I just kind of make it as easy as possible because I'm the one ironing it and putting it there. So that's the other thing. And the other thing that you'll notice is the icon. Normally, the icon of the name of the church is in the center. We do a kind of Greek style where we have the name of the church and the one there. It's So we kind of combine two different styles. So if you come in, you'll see an icon. You can say, oh, who's the saint? If we have the icon for that saint of the week or that day or that feast day or something like that, you can tell immediately. Like this week is the feast of the martyrs of Alaska. So I have that out here. Right? So this will change week to week, mostly because I pretty much have at least one for every week. And if it's for a feast day, we'll take it from around here and we'll put it in the center of the church. So immediately you walk in and you can tell. There's a different icon, there's a different color, something must be going on in the church. With me? Yeah.
On October 19, what would the color be?
Gold.
Gold. Okay. So maybe we could get gold ones there.
Yes. Yeah, like yellow or orange ones, yeah. And it's also St. Demetrius Day as well. But
I'm sorry?
it's St. Demetrius Day, but you don't need to. Which is a Memorial Saturday. So it's a long story. Anyway, everything will be in gold.
Okay.
I already told the bishops to wear gold. Anyway. Now, very often, you'll see, this drives me crazy when they clean. I'm very obsessive about these things. Anyway, it's called liturgical OCD. If everything doesn't line up, I go crazy. My seminarians tease me because I'll stand at the altar at seminary and the ribbon's off and I'll be repositioning. I'm like, oh, Father. You know. So, very often you'll find candles, right? And what is the purpose of the lamps or the candles? Actually, the church tells us it should be of the purest oil and the purest beeswax. All right? And you'll see them all over the place, and people light candles all over the place. It's a prayer. It's right from the Old Testament. You offer candles before the Lord. It's the light of Christ. It's a prayer. So very often people ask, well, where can I light candles? We give you many options. There is really nothing. You can light wherever you want, right? Normally, people will light anything with the departed over on this side, where the Golgotha is and that. And then for the living here, for intentions. But you can light candles wherever you want to light them. You know, and I always know the Russians show up because they come with like handfuls of candles and light like 50,000. My father-in-law, when he was the priest of the cathedral in Jersey City, he had a hockey player, a Russian hockey player for the Devils. And when he knew that there was a Devils match that night, because his wife would come in with like a handful of like huge like candles for the safety of her husband for the hockey game. It was kind of funny. So anyway, again, don't worry about where to light candles or light candles. It's a prayer. It's a physical way of praying. Just like we pray with the incense. It's a nasal way of praying. You know, we're offering incense to God. All right, so come on. So all this is a liturgical space that actually developed over time. So what I'm standing on here, this half circle, is called the ambo. The ambo. It's the place of authority. It's actually like if you're the priest will be instructed to announce from the ambo these instructions or whatever. Now originally the ambo was in the center of the church and it was raised up high. And you would go up onto the ambo, and the choir was underneath it. But over time, that disappeared, and the ambo became part of this for practical reasons. However, when the bishops come, you'll notice I'll put a stand out here, like a little square ambo, the cathedra. Like you ever heard the term ex-cathedra, speaking from there. The bishops start the service from there, as it used to be. So they'll start on a little ambo. I have a portable one in there that I drag out. And we have one in Alaska in our cathedral that St. Innocent built. Like you're always afraid to touch it, you know, because it's a holy thing. So this is an ambo. And then this space here is called a solia. A solia. And basically what that is a chant. It gives room for the priest to do what he wants to do, right? But it's a liturgical space. So you'll see, for example, when the deacon's serving, he's going to come out, he's going to stand over here, he's going to stand here. It's kind of a way of connecting the Holy of Holies with the church. Now, the other thing that you'll notice, you have these icons here, and they reflect these icons here, right? Originally, these didn't exist. People would come up and they would venerate these icons. But over time, it became kind of, especially in large churches, it just wasn't possible. So the church developed it so they had these so people could come and access them and kiss them. And there used to be a rail that went, and some churches still have that rail. And the icons were placed on that. And eventually that was replaced with this, the iconostas, which means a stand of icons. Okay? But there's a reason why it's set up the way it is, and we're going to get into it in a second. So anyway, so you have this space and you have these icons. So people ask, well, what do I do when I come in? When you come in, you should venerate the icon, venerate the icon, venerate this icon. When you walk here, cross yourself, venerate this icon. And when you leave, you do the same thing in reverse. Now, there could be many, many different little stands. We have one here. I usually find a saint of the month, a relic we have, or something like that that I'll put out as well. This week is both the Innocent and St. Sergius of Rodin, which still worked out perfectly for you. And then we have what's called the Golgotha. So this is, you ever heard the word Golgotha? That's where Christ was crucified, right? So there are many, many different types. This is a simple one. You could see huge ones in the Greek church. It's actually used during the services, particularly on Holy Thursday. So this tomb, it's called the tomb, will come out into the center. And at a certain point during the reading of the 12 Passion Gospels, the priest will come in procession. I can't remove this one. Usually we use the one that. In procession, and we place it, the cross in the center of the church. Christ being crucified. And all the services are done from the center there. And then on Friday, Holy Friday, you see in the back there, in that big frame, that's called the shroud, Lashanica or Epitaphios. On Holy Friday, that sits on the altar. And on Holy Friday, I bring that out in procession and I place it in the tomb. Christ's body is being placed in the tomb. And then it stays there. There's a lot of services. You'll learn about this. On Easter night, at a certain point, while they're singing about how God will arise, I actually take the shroud up, I bring it into the altar, and I place it on the altar. It sits there for all the way through Ascension, 40 days. And I serve on top of that. Right? So that's a liturgia. That's an incredibly beautiful shroud. Sometimes when the tomb is out, we'll have someone here every moment for 24 hours. There will not be a time in the shroud. We just started that tradition. And so people sign up to spend an hour at the shroud reading from the Psalms. And so we're keeping vigil at the tomb, just as the women did. Right? We're keeping vigil at the tomb. So it's a beautiful tradition in the church. And it's more than just symbolic in a way. We have to talk about that term symbol, because it's not what you think it is. But it really is about the reality, about us understanding what it is. We're not remembering the death and resurrection. We're there. Remember, heaven and earth, we're in a timeless space. All right, you with me so far?
Yep.
Great. Right? So, on the iconostas, what's the thing everyone notices are the doors. These are called the royal doors. They're open and closed at different points. The royal doors should be those doors. And only the emperor and the patriarch can come through them, hence royal. But again, over time, though, if you go to Hagia Sophia, they still have the royal doors, which is amazing. That church was built, 1,500 years ago? And these doors are monstrous, and they're just like totally smooth to open. So we have these royal doors. On the royal doors, you will have the 4 evangelists, right? 4 evangelists. These were actually painted by my wife's uncle when he was a seminarian many, many years ago. And then normally you'll have the Annunciation. In this case, we put the Annunciation on either side. All right? But normally, and sometimes the doors are really, really high, and you can't see. And anyway. But one thing I want you to notice is this icon and this icon. Okay? Now, who's that an icon? Jesus, right? Who's this an icon?
Mary.
You're wrong. They are, but they're not. This is an icon of the first coming of Christ, right? If you notice in this one, you know, he's there and he's giving a blessing and he has a scroll. And we'll learn more about why all those things are in the icon because they all have meaning. But this is the icon of the first coming of Christ. And this is the icon of the second coming. I'm sorry, this is the first coming of Christ. And this is the second coming of Christ, Christ in judgment. Right? I got it mixed up. So this is the incarnation. In Greek, we call this chronos. It's God's time, or earthly time. We live between Christ's first coming and his second coming. And we live right between that. And what happens, if you probably know some liturgy, what do I bring out of the royal doors? The chalice, right? To give communion. Christ is present now. In the body and blood of Christ. In the communion. So, first coming, Christ is here now. He will come again. You with me? Now, if you look above me, what's that an icon of? We don't call it the Last Supper. I get everybody all the time on that. We call it the first Eucharist. We do have icons that say Last Supper, but it's the first Eucharist. That's the important thing. Not that it was this Last Supper, but it was the institution of the Eucharist. Right? And even if you look at it, who's in that icon? You can't tell up there, but the Apostle Paul's in that icon. Well, he wasn't at the Last Supper, was he? So it's this idea of what we call kairos, God's time. That God's always being present with us throughout the ages. Right? So think about that. Earthly time, God's time. And where does it intersect? But in the altar. Okay? So, at certain times, these doors will be open, and certain times will be closed. When a bishop comes, they're open almost all the time. And actually, there's, if you really want to get technical, there's Russian style where the priest gets awarded the ability to open the doors and close the doors, but we don't really do that type of stuff. Now, on either side, you'll have these things. These are called deacon's doors, right? And they usually have either icons of the first deacons, Lawrence and Stephen, or normally they will have icons of the angels, Archangel Michael and Gabriel. What does an angel do? It connects heaven to earth, right? It's a messenger. When the deacon comes out and he stands here, if you notice he has his robe and he has that one stole, that's supposed to be his wings. And by the way, he holds it like this because the prayers used to be printed on him. It was a cheat sheet. And then there's all fancy stuff. The deacon connects heaven and earth, the Holy of Holies, with all the other people. And so these doors actually are that connection between that and that. Only an ordained person can go through these doors. Not like the lightning bolt's going to hit you, but it's only for ordained deacons when they have the blessing. If you notice, every time he comes out of these doors, that he gets my blessing, or the priest or the bishop. And then normally you'll see an icon here of John the Baptist, and an icon here, which would be the name of the church. All right? So if you look up there at that big icon, you see that? That's a very common theme. Christ in the center, Mary, and John the Baptist. Mary, the greatest born of man, John the Baptist, the last of the prophets. It's called Deosis. And so you'll see that. And then bigger iconostases will have other different icons. For example, my church in Las Vegas, which was huge, we had icons like St. Nicholas, because every Russian wanted St. Nicholas. We had a bunch of Serbs, so St. Salva. We We had Greeks, St. Constantine, Helen. You know, you kind of, blessing the bishop, you could kind of free. And then you'll see, in many churches, you'll see a row of icons above them. And that can be either the 12 feast days, or it could be the 12 apostles. And then you can have another layer above that. And that can be the Old Testament prophets. In fact, you could go to Russia and you have churches with layers upon layers of icons on it. It's like a huge wall. Going all the way up to the icon that you will see right there, which is the not made with hands. Or something like that, Ezekiel, the prophecy of Ezekiel, Christ in glory. Right? So the iconostas is telling you a lot of different things. The other thing that you'll notice, you will notice, is that on Easter night, after we've done it, we brought the shroud in, we light the Paschal candle, it's all dark in here, and then we light everyone's candles, and I start singing the resurrection hymn, and we open the doors. And the doors remain open the entire week. The tomb has been open, everything. And we go out in procession, and as we come back in, everything is bright, and the lights are on, and everything's happy, and you'll learn about that. So, anyway, and then you have banners, different banners. And then we have different icons of different saints. We kind of cluster them or group them. In many Orthodox churches, there'll be huge frescoes along the walls with themes from either Christ's life or from other themes. For example, when I was in Israel, where the Annunciation took place, they're all icons of healings, like all the themes. So there's a real particular way in which you do that. So now if you come on up here, I'm going to open these doors and I'm going to show you the altar. So the altar is very particular in how you build it. It has no nails in it. And every altar is consecrated. In other words, when the church is officially established, they will consecrate the altar, and in the altar will be a relic of a martyr. Because in the early church, we celebrate the service on the tombs of the martyrs. We still do. We still celebrate that. And then it's washed with chrism and with oil and wine. You have these special aprons you put on. And then it's given a white cloth, a baptism cloth. Right? And that stays on there. And then the altar is, again, it's consecrated. Only ordained can touch the altar. Not that you're going to burst into flames, but it's just to keep good order. So what's the thing that's in the center of the altar? Right? This is the Bible. It's actually only the Gospels. It's a liturgical Bible. Okay? So it's set up for priests to read, to follow the cycle of services. And you have couple different ones, and I don't want to mess up my ribbons, but it'll actually have things like number 62, right? So I look and say, what's the reading for this week? Reading 62. It's right there. Okay, makes it easier for us. And on the gospel, you'll see the four evangelists, the resurrection. And then on the back, you'll have the liturgious saints and the crucifixion. All right? So some are fancy, some are not as fancy. This is my standard basic thing. The ribbon was given to me by my mom. So I have a couple of things. She finds stuff and she's like, oh, I found this really cool thing. She runs her own boutique, Orthodox boutique. Anyway, so that is enthroned on the altar. It sits in the center of the altar. It's important. At certain times, you'll see we'll bring it out, and then we'll place it on there, and we reverence it. But underneath the altar is the single most important thing in the church. If this church is burning down, I have to get this out. And you want to know what's in here. So come here, I'll show you. So it has a red cloth, I got that from, some nuns made that for me in Belarus. And that's just to protect it. And then in there is this gold cloth. All right? So, that gold cloth says, with the blessing of the Holy Synod, Archbishop Michael has consecrated this, and it's called an antimensium instead of altar, for the Church of St. Gregory the Theologian in Wappinger Falls, and it's signed by him. And it has a relic in it, the relic of a martyr, right there, see? And this is the permission for us to exist as a church, right? So I cannot serve a liturgy without, and it stays with the church. It's not mine, it's the church's. The priests may be assigned if like military chaplains or stuff like that, it'll stay with them. So even if I had a camp and I had to go serve a liturgy camp, I would have to take this with me and serve on top of this. So everyone wants to know what this is. It's a sponge, right? It's a natural sponge that you iron and you press, and it's to help me keep this clean from particles and other things. So this is this gives us permission to exist. So at certain parts of the liturgy, I open this up. And when I do the great entrance with the chalice and the thing, I'm putting it on top of this to serve the service. Now, what does this look like? What you see here? With this icon, where have you seen that else? Where else have you seen that? Yeah, the shroud. Right? In some traditions, on Holy Saturday, they have the shrouds out. They serve the liturgy on that. You're not really supposed to, but they do. So anyway, so this is, at certain times you'll see me opening. Sometimes at the end you'll see me like kind of picking it up and kind of making sure all the particles, because I always, my students, I said, I will check your intimacy. If I find any particles on there, it means you're not doing your job. Because when you're ordained as a priest, they actually place the lamb in your hand. They say, you are responsible for every particle before God. So that's your job, is to do that. Now, if you get in trouble, and I've had to do this a couple of times on behalf of the bishops, they will send someone to pull your antimensium. It means they can't serve the service until they answer for whatever trouble they're in. So, so that's everything. We cannot exist without this. And that's why it sits underneath the altar, and it is the single most important. And you have to fold it the same way. I yell at my students about that too.
What exactly is the relic?
A piece of a bone of a saint.
It's a bone.
A bone. So we have a couple of relics around here, right here. Saint Sebastian, Saint Raphael of Brooklyn. It's a small piece of the bone of the saint.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and we have
It's actual bone.
Actual bone, yeah.
Wow.
So probably the oldest one we have is Saint Alexander Nevsky. That's from the 11th century. Saint Seraphim of Seraph, which is one of the most famous Orthodox saints from the 15th century. That's right up there, that little icon next to John the Baptist. That's Saint Seraphim of Seraph. Since I was the keeper of the relics for the bishops, I used to be the one who has to. I don't want to talk about it, but you have a little special tool to take it out. And so when I came here, I asked the Metropolitan, when I was coming here, can I bring? We have a big collection of relics at the Chancery, and can I bring these relics? He gave me a blessing to do that and put them into the icons. So yeah, it's kind of cool. And when we visit, when we would go on official visits, we would bring a relic of St. Herman of Alaska, the first American saint. And so we would give it to the patriarch, and he would give us some famous saints' relics. So in the Chancery, we have all sorts of different relics.
Well, it's a big thing. Even in Greece, they have the relics of saints, and in the streets they'll bring them out, and everyone's praying. They go under them. They have the relics pass over them.
And we venerate them. Yep. When I was in St. Catherine's Monastery in the Sinai Desert, there they have the head of St. Catherine. If you're special, they bring it out and you get to venerate it. They count all the jewels because people tried to take the jewels. And then you get a special ring that you venerate. It's in my office that you got to venerate St. Catherine's head. It seems weird.
So you kiss it.
You kiss it.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. It seems weird.
And is it because I know
it's a skull.
Oh, it's a skull.
Yeah.
Okay, because I know some of these have skin.
Yeah, Saint Alexis Toth, where's his icon's back there. I was actually a seminarian when he was made a saint. And if you look at the official pictures, you'll see this young seminarian carrying his icon. When they opened his tomb, he was like as if he died yesterday, except for his big toe.
What do they call it?
Incorrupted. Yeah. His big toe, because there was a leak in the casket and water was dripping on his toe.
Wow.
And his whole body is under, it's enclosed, but you can see it at St. Tikhon's Monastery. As with St. Raphael, they have it at Antiochian Village. St. John of San Francisco is, and some of them actually weep myrrh. They weep beautiful smelling oil, like St. Nicholas. You could still smell it, and people collect it and they anoint it, people with it. It's a pious thing.
Yeah, there are icons too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
We're going to get to that in a second. You're going to see this. Anyway, so, that goes back. Now we have these two crosses. They're just hand crosses that I bless people with. But, if you remember in the Holy of Holies, there were a few things that were in the Ark of the Covenant, right? One of them was the Ten Commandments, right? One of them was the rod of Aaron that had budded forth flowers. There was manna, that was the food that came from heaven. There was there was the 7-branch candlestick. There was the censer. There were the drawings of the angels. So if we look at the altar, come up closer, you'll see we have the candles. No, don't go through the doors. Oh my gosh. So you have the 7-branch candles. We just had these made. These are the angels. So you'll see they'll carry it, and sometimes they'll hold them above it. It's supposed to be the angels. We have the two that represent the two natures of Christ. We have the cross. We'll bring this out on procession. We always believe that the rod of Aaron that brought forth life was a foreshadowing of the cross, the wood that brought forth life with Christ. And then we have this little thing. This isn't just a little box. Sometimes you have really fancy ones. And in here is the reserved sacrament. So on Holy Thursday each year, I make the communion. I make an extra one. And this is when I go to visit people in the hospital and I bring communion, like when I would bring your mom. I would take it from this box. It's very dry. I touched each particle with a drop of the consecrated wine. I let it dry out and it stays in here. The manna from heaven. We still have that right here on the altar. And so that's what that is. Okay? And that always, there's never a time that that's not on the altar, except right now when I moved it off the altar. So anyway, and then we have the censer right there. And we're going to get to that in a second. The other thing that we have in the altar is the chrism. So the chrism is the holy oil. Remember I was telling you about this. That's made by the head of the church. Right? Once a year, as needed. And that has the old chrism, and that has the old chrism. It goes all the way back to the apostles. So each priest, each parish has chrism. So when I baptize a child, after I baptize them, I chrismate them with the oil. When people are received into the church, they get chrismated with the holy oil. It connects them with the apostles. And so the head of the church makes it. The priests get summoned together. You sign up. It takes 24 hours. There's all these different ingredients that come from the Old Testament. And they're constantly stirring it. And someone's reading the gospel as it's being done. And at the end, if it's done correctly, then it all gets a perfect color. And then it's put in these big jars, put in the chancery. And then when the bishops come, one of my jobs was, how many people need bottles of chrism? So I would fill up these bottles and they would take it back and distribute. When I was in Moscow at the Patriarch's private chapel, he had huge jars of chrism. Like huge, like 10 of them on each side. So here is the oil. You can always know it's chrism. When the icons that weep, they smell just like this. So if you want to smell.
Wow.
Potent.
Yeah, as soon as you open it, you can smell it. So that is the holy oil that each of us. You've been chrismated.
I love the smell.
Yeah, it is. So that's the holy chrism. That again goes all the way back to the apostles. Because you take the old chrism and you put it in a thing when right before it's consecrated, you pour the old chrism. It just goes all the way back. So by becoming what we call an autocephalous church, a self-governing church, that means we have the right to make our own chrism. Before that, we used to have to get it from Russia, because that's who we were under. And of course, the communists wouldn't let them. So we used to have to sneak it in. And we have the bottles that they used to sneak the chrism in like secret ways, and then we would be at meetings and they kind of slip it to us under the table, so no one knew that we had the chrism. And you know what? They hadn't been used in like, I don't know how long. You open up, you still smell the chrism in it. It doesn't go away. So that's one of the things. So this is a baptism kit. So on Saturday I'll be doing a baptism, and there's olive oil, because we anoint people with the olive oil. I have my little wands, my little scissors to cut the hair. So we tonsure them, and little sponges and all sorts of little things. So
why do you cut the hair?
So everyone what can a child offer? Has nothing. But according to the Old Testament, the first offering of the hair. So we actually, and it's sometimes hard with kids who don't have any hair. You're kind of trying to find I gotta find something to cut here, and then you burn it in the candle. And so everyone is tonsured on their baptism. When you are made a reader in the church, the first level as you go, you are tonsured. And if you're made a monk or a nun, they tonsure you again. But this is an interesting one. When they do that, and the bishop does it, he has the scissors and he slides the scissors down the floor, and the monk or the nun has to go pick it up and bring it back to him, and he does that 3 times to make sure that you're really sure you want to do this. You're really sure you're really sure. It's just a tradition to make sure that they truly understand what's happening. Kind of a beautiful. I will not be doing that. At least I hope not. So this here is called the table of oblation. All right? Now, originally, my favorite liturgical term. This originally was called the scoopophylakium. Come on. How many times have you ever heard that one? The scoopophylakium was a separate room from the church. And people would bring their offerings there, and the deacons would go through them. And they would prepare the communion in that room. So when you see me bringing the chalice, I come out here, go around here, and I bring it back. It was actually started with them being in a separate room and bringing it into the church. Well, in Russia, it's damn cold and snowy. Who wants to go trudging through the snow? So over time, that kind of disappeared. Though at the seminary, we do have a separate room. Many parishes kind of turned that into a separate room. And it became a table that's there. All right? So before you even come to church, I'm here, and I have a whole service that I do, which I prepared. Like the bread and wine just doesn't happen. This doesn't get into there. There's a service I do. It's called the proskymedia. And the proskymedia is a series of prayers, and we're going to learn all about this. So when you come into church, you'll probably notice that there's something on that table, the chalice and the paten, and it's covered with a cloth. Right? I finished the proskymedia, it's all prepared for the service. Usually it's me. If my deacon comes, then he'll do it with me, but usually it's just the priest and some servers together. And I usually start 7:40, so it usually takes me about 20 minutes to do it. And you're going to learn all why. But anyway, so it's not like things just mystically happen. So on there you'll see I have a censer, because it's all part of the service, water, and I also have the wine. In here is storage. In this case, it's stored here. Sometimes you have separate closets. And in here, we have all sorts of things. The cloths, right? We're going to learn about these. The cloths that we use for the service that cover it. And if you remember, I think I said, when the priest dies, when a priest is ordained, he's brought out during the entrance, and he actually has this over his head. This over his head, because he's being offered. When a priest dies, they cover his face with this, because you're not supposed to remember him as Eric, but the priest. This was from my father-in-law. Gift on one of my favorite set of vestments he gave to me. So anyway, so then I have a whole bunch of different colors. I also have in here all the knives, all the chalices that we use. So they're basically all stored in here. We're going to have a whole class on all this stuff. So that's basically what this is. It's just stored and different things that I'll need at different times during the year. So now, if everyone can come around to this door, you can come in. Here you can come in. Yep. So you have sacristy rooms. These are just rooms. Like on that side, I have a bunch of liturgical stuff. We'll see it in a second. But here's the altar service where our wine is stored. We just had this put in this 2 days ago, so it looks so much nicer and not sticky and gross. And but I want you to come over here and take a peek, and you'll see a chair there. Right? You see that nice fancy chair? This is a simple one. That's the bishop's throne. Only the bishop can sit in that. Remember I told you about the basilica, the place of judgment? If you see some traditional churches, this is like a half circle, a quarter circle, and the bishop sits there. That's the bishop's chair, right? In the Russian tradition, in the Greek tradition, he sits over there. Don't ask me why. Actually, I can tell you why. That's where the patriarch sat, and that's where the emperor sat. But after the Turks took over, the bishops became the political leaders, so they sat in the emperor's seat instead of the bishop's seat. But that's another story. So, and then there's other chairs there. That's called the synthronian. Synthronian, which means to sit together. Again, fancy words for simple concepts. So you'll see at certain points I'm allowed to sit during the service. And usually, it's interesting. In the early world, the students stood and the teacher sat. Now, the teacher stands and the students sit. It's like completely reversed. So at certain points when I'm allowed to sit. But anyway, there's other icons in here, and then you have what's called the high place. So you'll see that we're always, that's this big center here. This icon was actually painted by a monk, a new skeet. He died a month after it was finished in a motorcycle accident. Wow. And so that is, there's many different ways you can do it. Normally you may have an icon of Mary kind of overshadowing and the communion. In this case, that's the prophecy of Ezekiel. And with the four and the visions, as well as the saints. Don't ask me how they decided on these saints. They did it somehow. But there's all different saints. We're actually starting to draw up plans to do these two walls so that the whole inside will be covered with the fresco that will continue this theme all the way around. Okay?
Yep.
That's a casket. Just in case you were wondering. And there's another, I just used the one on the other side. They're made in a very traditional Orthodox style, and some people want to have the very traditional Orthodox casket. And so we have a guy up in Vermont, a deacon, who makes it. It's going to take a couple of months for the next one to come in, but people always want to know why we have a casket in here. So
I just like the way you said that.
it's a pain in the neck to get down. I can tell you that.
It's not like my mother's purple.
Not like your mom's purple, right. And in here, there's all different glass, like different colors for the lights and all sorts of different things, just storage in here. So come on down, and I'll meet you on the other side, and we'll go see the other room. Super exciting stuff, sacristy rooms. We're usually the all
My hands, I'm so tired.
Come on in. different priest vestments. We'll learn about those. I usually wear my own because I have like a gazillion vestments. There's all different altar cloths in here and different vestments as well. Different books I may need. Litia tray, we'll use that for feast days. That cross that was out, if you remember. Different icons, all different smelly oils. Some of my liturgical books. Because in the Orthodox world, why do in one book which you can do in like 30? Right? We like to complicate things. These are books that will be used during Holy Week. And then these are just, I don't know, incense. I have all different smells because I like to change the smell up because you get boring. And
where do you get the incense
what?
from? Is it special?
Yeah, this one is from a monastery in West Virginia, an Orthodox monastery. This is Damask Rose. And then I have a monastery up in outside of Boston that does some of it. There's a whole bunch of places that you can get incense, and so I can get it from like some of these are from Greece.
Us to burn it like at home?
Yeah.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah. You have to get the little charcoals, and the charcoals are made for Catholic services, not Orthodox services. They don't last a long time, and we have a problem with shrinkflation in the charcoal business. It's now becoming smaller and smaller, and it's really bugging me. We got to go through like 2-3 charcoals for a service. This is incense that we actually made, the kids. We all made this incense, which was kind of cool. And then I bring out during Lent, we have actual frankincense from Ethiopia, and that stuff is very expensive. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This box probably cost $100 for this, and it's right from Ethiopia. It's a sap. It's a tree sap. It smells beautiful. And so during Lent, I use this a lot. And,
the process is hard, right, to extract it?
Yes, incredibly complicated. And then, which is the basis of all incense. They will use cheaper stuff if they're going to mix in and stuff. So,
What do you use that for, the pure frankincense?
During the pre-sanctified liturgies during Lent, you'll learn about that.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's just beautiful smell. And that's it. I mean, these are my brushes that I use for holy water when I want to bless people. Where I use this. I didn't show you the big jar. That's the holy water. So on January 7th, which is Theophany, I bless holy water for the year. You could do it at another time too.
Yeah.
All right. The biggest problem in churches, they always make their sacristy rooms too small. Like, you never have room to store all the stuff, and you don't have room to fold your vestments and stuff. And Vegas had huge, which was so nice. So anyway, so now you kind of see how this connection is, right? This idea of the Holy of Holies, which is really seen in its completeness. And instead of the priest only going in once a year, with Christ's resurrection, the priest can go in and out of the Holy of Holies. It's now open to all, in a sense. And so if you keep in those three things in kind of a way, then you start to understand why the movements we do during the services are all part of connecting all of this. Some of it are very practical. How do I get the chalice from there to there? Right? We'll learn about why the gospel and all the other things. Some of it is very practical. Some of it is very representational of what we're doing. So keep an eye open and see if you can spot those type of things. For example, when the bishop or the deacon is reading the gospel, which way is he facing? As opposed to when I'm reading the gospel, a priest, I'm facing in a different direction. We'll learn about that. Do you guys have any questions? This was a lot of information, but I hope it helps you understand.
Yeah.
Yes?
When you open the doors during liturgy, is that connected with the lights
Yes, it's just now, of course, they didn't have electric lights in the early church, right? But during the Vesper service, when the doors are closed, the lights are supposed to be off. So, in many Orthodox churches, they have a big chandelier in the middle, right? And the chandelier is supposed to represent, heaven and all that sort of thing. But in the monasteries, for example, they'll have the chandelier, and a certain service, and there's actually a point during the service when you light the evening lamp, and then there's a point in the matin service where you actually spin it. It's like a light show, and it kind of down. But that doesn't always happen. Whitestone had a big lamp, big chandelier as well. Whitestone, the interior of the Whitestone is much more traditional on how an Orthodox church is set up.
With a big blue cupola.
And that whole thing. No, the arguments, more arguments over the cupola than anything else.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So the oil, is that the same oil the Greek church uses for Holy Unction?
No, it's a different oil. So Holy Unction is a combination, it's olive oil. I have different oil, like rose oil and stuff, they'll put that in there. But in some traditions, just like the Good Samaritan, he poured wine and oil into the wounds. So you actually pour wine into the oil, and that's the unction service. Right. So that is a different oil. Right. So there's a difference between chrism and then just holy oil.
Okay.
And then I have different oils from different saints, like a lamp that burned on top of wherever they're buried. They'll get oil from that, and you'll go and you'll anoint people from the oil. Or like St. Nicholas, where the myrrh, they'll put that in olive oil, and then you can go and anoint people with the myrrh. Okay? Great question. Any other questions? Yes, Hank?
Is it a specific olive oil you get from a specific place?
You're supposed to get the best.
Just don't get virgin olive oil from anything.
No, I just... What did I get here? Whatever the best one is. Because I'm an Italian, no, I didn't even get Italian olive oil. That's pretty embarrassing. Yeah, you're supposed to get extra virgin, whatever the best oil you can get. In the Greek tradition, when you baptize a child, you slather the child with all sorts of oil. I don't know how you hold the baby. In the Russian tradition, because they got olive oil all over the place in Greece. In Russia, it's very rare, so you just dabble it on them, right? So, yeah. I was just teaching a class about that, actually, yesterday. Like when we had the St. Anne icon, the miracle icon that came, they gave me oil, that icon was weeping. And so the abbot gave me oil that I'll bring out every now and then, anoint people with. And I have a whole collection of holy oils, which I had a weird thing happen. I hadn't opened it for a long, long time. And I have all from different saints and all this, and it all like gelled. Like the olive oil was like really like jello, like hardened. And I can't get it to So I tried microwaving it, maybe that would, and it just gelled right up again. So I got to figure out something how I'm going to get it to loosen up so I can anoint people with it. I can't even like scrape it. Maybe it's God telling me I should have kept it locked up in a box in my office. Other questions? Are there any questions online?
No, just one guy replying.
Oh, yeah, Joaquin. Hi, Joaquin. Usually my mom's watching. Mom is watching. Very often in an Orthodox church, you will not see chairs. The tradition is for people to stand. You'll just see chairs around the sides, right? For people who need to sit. The idea is that you're before God, you don't sit before God and watch the show. You should stand before God. In America, because we started buying these old churches and they already have pews, we just sort of became a tradition. So it depends on which diocese you're in. Like when I was in the Diocese of the West, we didn't have any chairs, only around the sides. The bishop wanted it that way. Here, we're not so strict about it. But don't be surprised if you walk in an Orthodox church and you don't see any chairs, right? And there was a joke, there was a 19th century Oxford Don who went to services over there in Moscow. And he, our services, especially Holy Week, go on and on and on. He's like, how do these people stand? and have like feet of stone. Like they just stand for the services. Well, I don't know. We do that for lines for tickets and other sort of things. But if you need to sit, you can sit. We're not. I'm not the seat Nazi. You do what you need to do. Other questions? You guys are too easy. You have a question? Everything's clear. As close as you can get, right? Okay. Well, there it is. Oh, choir. So some churches will have choirs in the loft. Some will have them in the back. And some will actually have a little screen, like the Golgotha, and the choir will be behind the screen, which is kind of cool because when we have that in each service, I appreciate you can look just when they're doing something. Now I have to turn around and I'll look at my wife and she'll look at me. I'm like, what? You don't see the little stuff going on between us during the services. And so the choir, we have the choir back there. So again, choirs can be in different places. I'm trying to think if I forgot anything. And yes, we have air conditioning and we have electric lights. A couple of the churches, the new churches that are being built, they're building them without electricity, without electric lights. They're going to be really traditional. Yeah, good luck in the winter. I'm quite happy to have the air conditioning and the heat and the electric lights and all that sort of stuff. It's not uncommon to see, again, rugs, different Turkish style rugs in churches. Because, you know, in America, we all want to put like rugs on the church, and I'll guarantee you I will burn a hole in one of those rugs with my sensor at some point. So it's easier to have nice wooden floors like this. That's it. Okay, thank you all. Next week, we will have class, and we're going to talk about holy tradition and the scriptures, like how it all came together, and what do we mean by holy tradition. And then we have coming up, the seminarians are working on their classes, so they'll be doing some classes because they have to, because I said they have to. All right. Thank you. See, you did it perfect.